the title of this evening's study is Marriage and the Family. The first slide here, you probably weren't expecting to see this. It's a news report of a woman who married a pirate. Not only did she marry a pirate, but she married a dead pirate. Not only did she marry a dead pirate, but apparently it was the ghost of a 300-year-old pirate. A woman by the name of Miss Teague. She went public in January 2018 about her marriage to this pirate called Jack. And then later she went public about their separation, because apparently her marriage to a pirate ghost didn't actually work out, and they've now gone their own separate ways. International news outlets expressed their bewilderment at her choice of spouse, and then other people have made other choices of marriage. Others have married trees, rocks, even countries have been married by various people. Where do they get this idea from that you can actually marry anything that you feel like marrying? Well, the origin of marriage goes back to the Garden of Eden in Genesis chapter 2 and verse 18. And the Lord God said, "It is not good that the man should be alone. I will make him a helpmeet for him." And society is founded on families. God ordained the family unit. He says in Genesis chapter 2 and verse 24, "Therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother, and shall cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh." And God defined the family as being mother, father, and children, with succeeding generations branching out from there. And so it says in Genesis chapter 1, verses 27 and 28, "So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him, male and female created he them. And God blessed them and said unto them, Be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth." And so the first family unit was made up of male, the husband, and female, the wife, and the children that resulted from that union. And God went on to say in Genesis chapter 3, verses 16 and 21, "Unto the woman, he said, Thy desire shall be to thy husband." And Adam called his wife's name Eve, because she was the mother of all living. As a quick aside here, it's interesting that we trace back our heritage, our ancestry of every single one of us, no matter what nationality we are, no matter where we come from. We all trace our heritage back to Adam and Eve. And of course, we trace it back through Noah as well. So all of us have this common foreparents, this common beginning and origin to the family unit. "And unto Adam also and to his wife did the Lord God make coats of skins and clothe them." And so the first clothing that they had, which came as a result of sin, were the skins that God made them. Now, we've mentioned Noah. Likewise, after the flood, God reaffirmed the family to Noah. We read here in Genesis chapter 9 and verse 1, where it says, "And God blessed Noah and his sons, and said unto them, Be fruitful and multiply, and replenish the earth." After the flood, there was a similar pattern. Again, it revolved around the family. And you can look from verses 1 through to 7, where it says the family base of society was there established. The nations of Israel and Judah were established on the basis of 12 brothers, 12 family units. So male and female joined together to make a family, and families joined together to make a society. Marriage is the foundation of both family units and societies. And this is the endorsement that we find in the Old Testament. Now, interestingly, when we move into the New Testament, we find that this same endorsement continues. Jesus began his ministry. We're told in John chapter 2, verses 1 through 10, we're told that Jesus began his ministry at a wedding, which is, of course, the beginning of a new family unit. And then after this, he went down to Capernaum. He, his mother, his brethren, and his disciples, and they continued there not many days, we're told in John chapter 2 and verse 12. So Christ began his ministry at the beginning of a new family unit, and then as a family unit, Christ traveled with his brethren. At the end of his earthly ministry, Christ made provision for his mother before his death. In John chapter 19 and verse 26, we find this. Now, in the New Testament, we also have the biblical definition of marriage. This is in Matthew chapter 19, verses 4 to 6, where he says, "And he answered and said unto them, Have you not read that he which made them at the beginning made them male and female? And said, For this cause shall a man leave his father and mother, and shall cleave to his wife, and they twain shall be one flesh. Wherefore they are no more twain, or no longer two, but are one flesh. What therefore God has joined together, let no man put asunder." And of course, you'll recognize this statement. We hear it so many times in wedding ceremonies. The Bible is in fact the basis of the common law of this country. The Magna Carta was based on the book of Deuteronomy. Here you can see a statement from the Reverend Andrew Watson, the Bishop of Guildford, that he made in 2019. And he said, "The basic principles of the Magna Carta are firmly earthed in the vision of the book of Deuteronomy, and indeed in the teaching of King Jesus, who came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." So the basis of marriage is there, coming from the Bible into British law. And to really confirm this, we're going to look at a statement by Lord Penzance. This was made in the case of Hyde versus Hyde and Woodmansey. This goes back to 1866. And he actually said that marriage has been well said to be an institution. The position or status of husband and wife is a recognized one throughout Christendom. I conceive that marriage, as understood in Christendom, may for this purpose be defined as the voluntary union for life of one man and one woman to the exclusion of all others. So there we go. This is a traditional definition of marriage found in the law, founded over 150 years ago in 1866. So I want to pause and just have a look at some of the traditional definitions of marriage, definitions that range from 1775 right through to recent times of 1961. Because the definition of marriage has always been between a man and a woman. So here's the first one. This is recorded by Samuel Johnson in his Dictionary of the English Language, and he says that marriage is the act of uniting a man and a woman for life, a state perpetual union. So here we find in the 18th century, marriage there was established, coming from the Bible, as being man and woman for life. If we look at the next statement, marriage, the act of marrying or the state of being married, the legal union of a man and a woman for life as husband and wife, 1828. We get this definition. And it's interesting to see that a couple of hundred years ago, the idea was that when you married, you got married one time. You didn't get married to maybe get divorced later if you felt like it. The idea was that you're getting married, and that's going to be it one time for the rest of your life. Now, the next definition, 1913, Webster's Secondary School Dictionary. Once again, it's telling you about the mutual relation of husband and wife, wedlock. This is what marriage is. And then we come up to 1961. This is again Webster, the New Collegiate Dictionary, and it states again, the mutual relation of husband and wife, the institution whereby men and women are joined in a special kind of social and legal dependence for the purpose of founding and maintaining a family. And I quite like that definition because it really rounds the whole thing off. It shows the purpose for what you're doing. However, since 1961, the traditional definition changed when marriage was redefined. In fact, it was redefined in 2013. And so as a result of the redefinition of marriage, modern definitions of marriage follow the Marriage Same-Sex Couples Act of 2013. And the dictionary definitions have changed as well as to be between two people. Let's have a look at some of the dictionaries here. Cambridge Dictionary Online, marriage, legally accepted relationship between two people in which they live together. Collins Dictionary, the relationship between two people who are married. Oxford Dictionary of English, this is quite a well-known dictionary, now says the legally or formally recognized union of two people as partners in a personal relationship. It notes in brackets at the end of that in some jurisdictions, traditionally or historically, it's a union between man and woman. And then if we go on and look at Merriam-Webster, it says marriage is the mutual relation of married persons, the institution whereby individuals are joined in marriage. So there you have these modern definitions, but you will notice that there is a very specific change. No longer is it the biblical definition of man and wife. Now we're talking about two people. The problem that we find is that with this change of definition, there is also a change in the attitude towards the traditional idea of marriage. This is a very recent report, 2nd of March, this one came out. No longer are we talking about a couple to get married. Here it's a throuple, 3 people in one marriage, 3 men who have married together and have now been battling and going through court so that they can have all 3 of the fathers, 3 dads, listed on their son's birth certificate. Note that they paid $120,000 to do this. In fact, in this country, as far as I know, you still have to have the mother's details on the birth certificate. The father's you might not have, but the mother's has to be there because obviously nobody is born unless they are born of a mother. But this trio here, they have now got their second child. I'm not going to go into the details of how they all came about to be together. They've written a book about the subject, 3 Dads and a Baby, and they talk about the fact that their children are brought up with 3 parents. Apparently one is called Dad, the other one, and next one is called Daddy, and a third one is called Papa. And that's how they work it out between them. But the really important point is that things have changed just in this century. If we look at some legal cases, I don't know if you're going to necessarily recognize this couple here. This is Eunice and Owen Johns, and they went to court in 2011 at when Derby City actually discriminated against them. Now, this is what happened. In 2008, this couple, Eunice and Owen Johns, they are experienced foster carers and they applied to foster a child in Derby, but their application was stalled because of their Christian sexual ethics. In a High Court judgment on the 28th of February in 2008, and 11, the judges failed to rule on the specific declaration sought by the Johns and stated that homosexual rights trump freedom of conscience in the context of fostering, and that if children are placed with parents who have biblical Christian views, then there may well be a conflict with the local authorities' duty to safeguard and promote the welfare of looked after children. They stated that councils can require the promotion of homosexuality and made it clear that councils can stop Christians from fostering children on this basis. The Johns remained unable to foster. In the 1990s, Eunice and Owen, both of them Pentecostalists, were considered more than good enough by Derby Council to give a temporary home to dozens of needy young children. In 2007, after the introduction of equality laws, the Johns were banned from fostering because social workers said their views now made them unsuitable. The couple's religious beliefs meant they were not willing to declare that the practice of homosexuality was a good thing. And this actually raises a massive question as to whether many Christians will be deemed suitable to foster their own children. Now, here you can see there's a statement from Lord Justice Munby, and he said that in Owen and Eunice John's case, we live in a secular state in which the established church has become largely irrelevant. The Judeo-Christian principles are no longer accepted in society, so it is no longer the case that our laws must or should automatically reflect those principles. It's really a bit of a problem there, because it means that the rights of one particular gender-based group seem to trump the rights of those who are a faith-based group. Or in other words, where is the balance? Where is the equality in human rights? It's a very serious question, in fact. Now, I'm going to give you a quote now from the book Acts of the Apostles by Ellen White. It's a very interesting statement. She says here, "We are to recognize human government as an ordinance of divine appointment and teach obedience to it as a sacred duty within its legitimate sphere. But when its claims conflict with the claims of God, we must obey God rather than men. God's word must be recognized as above all human legislation. A 'thus saith the Lord' is not to be set aside for 'thus saith the church' or a 'thus saith the state.' The crown of Christ is to be lifted above the diadems of earthly potentates." Now, as I say, this is quite an interesting statement, because the 'thus saith the Lord' has been set aside. And one of the greatest attacks against the God-ordained uniting of men and women has been the destruction of the traditional family unit by the acceptance of same-sex relationships, in particular same-sex marriage. Now, this form of relationship was actually condemned by the Bible. In fact, Adam dwelled in the land of Canaan, and Lot dwelled in the cities of the plain and pitched his tent towards Sodom. But the men of Sodom, we are told in the book of Genesis, were wicked and sinners before the Lord exceedingly. And the Lord said, because the cry of Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and because their sin is very grievous, they had their punishment. Genesis chapter 19, verses 4-7. It says there that before they lay down, the men of the city, now this is to do with the visitors that went to the city. They had gone to visit Lot, and they had gone into Lot's house, but it says before they lay down, the men of the city, even the men of Sodom, compassed the house round about, old and young, all the people from every quarter, and they called unto Lot and said unto him, where are the men which has came into thee this night? Bring them out to us that we may know them. And Lot went out at the door unto them and shut the door after him and said, I pray you, brethren, do not do so wickedly. Now, what exactly was it that was so wicked that Sodom and Gomorrah was going to do? Now, we have another quotation here. This is from Jude chapter 1 and verse 7, where it says, even as Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities about them in like manner, giving themselves over to fornication and going after strange flesh, that's the statement that's used, strange flesh, are set forth for an example, suffering the vengeance of eternal fire. It was on a biblical basis that the going after strange flesh was condemned in law. In fact, if we move on, another Bible statement from the book of Leviticus, chapter 20 and verse 13, it says, if a man also lie with mankind as he lieth with woman, both of them have committed an abomination. They shall surely be put to death. Their blood shall be upon them. This is Leviticus 20:13. Verse 15 also talks about this. It says, and if a man lie with a beast, he shall surely be put to death, and you will slay the beast. It seems somewhat incredible to us today that God regarded this in such strict terms that anybody who went after strange flesh was to be put to death. Now, when the laws of this country were framed, it was an unmentionable subject, as it had been from the time of the Roman Emperor Constantine. In the 4th century, his sons actually were involved with this, but it was unmentionable. We couldn't be told exactly what they were doing. Here is a quotation from Blackstone's commentaries on the laws of England. Now, if you have any involvement with law and legal process, Blackstone's is one of the books, the revised, updated version that people still go to understand the law of this country. So Sir William Blackstone, when he wrote this, he talked about this particular sin, this particular crime, and he said a subject, the very mention of which is a disgrace to human nature, which leads me to add a word concerning its punishment, which the express law of God determined to be capital, that is, it brings the death penalty, of which we have an example by the destruction of 2 cities by fire from heaven, so that this is a universal, not merely a provincial precept. And our ancient law in some degree imitated this punishment by commanding such miscreants be burned to death. Now, you will notice that Blackstone, again, he doesn't quote what exactly the sin is, but he's very clear when he talks about the punishment. Now, let's look at Sargent's Laws of England. Here, Sargent says, the infamous crime against nature committed either with man or beast is an offense of so dark a nature, we will not describe the nature of this offense, but will imitate in this respect the delicacy of our English law, which treats it as a crime not fit to be named. Every person convicted of this abominable crime committed either with mankind or with any animal shall be kept in penal servitude for life, or not less than 10 years. So this is from Sergeant Stephen's commentaries on the law. However, following the legislation and legalization of homosexuality in 1967, there has been a push for same-sex marriage, but this has been an attack on family values. Now, here is a picture of, this is Marsha Gessen, who said this. She said, gay marriage is a lie. Fighting for gay marriage generally involves lying about what we're going to do with marriage when we get there. It's a no-brainer that the institution of marriage should not exist. So this is an attack on one of 2 institutions that was ordained by God in the Garden of Eden. There were 2 things that God brought in. He brought in the state of marriage and the seventh-day Sabbath. And that shows you where the marriage state is on a par with the commandments of God. Now, okay, maybe this is a question where we've got a majority of people who are saying, well, we feel something different. We're in a democratic country, and so they decide to change the laws. So let's just quickly have a look at some statistics on this. First of all, sexual orientation in the UK. This is through 3 years. We're looking at 2015, 2016, 2017. This is the latest data that I've got, and it's very interesting. When you look on the left, you see the percentage of heterosexual or straight people in this country, 93.7% in 2015, 93.4% in 2016, 93.2% in 2017. Now, you'll notice that it's going down, but it's a very small percentage amount that it's going down. Over those 3 years, it's only 0.5 percentage point that it's gone down. If you look at lesbian, gay, or bisexual, what's known as LGB, you will see that it's risen from 1.8 percentage point to 2 percentage points in 2016 and remained the same in 2017. Other is 0.5%. Now, I'm not quite sure what other is. I'm not even going to attempt to go there. And then you've got 4%, 4.1% who say they either don't know what their sexual orientation is or they're not going to tell us anyway. So let's look at the next graph. The next graph is the UK marital status in 2017. So you've got the pie chart here divided up between single, married, civil partner, divorced, and widowed. You can see the largest, just over half of the people there are married. That's in the orange. Then you've got another large chunk, the dark blue, that are single. Then you've got the lighter blue, people who are widowed, so they had been married, but they lost their partner. And then in yellow, those who were married, but for whatever reason, it didn't work out and they got divorced. In the gray, you see the amount of civil partnerships. Can you see a gray line on the pie chart? In fact, it's this line going down here. You see, it's a very, very small percentage. In fact, the law has been changed to suit a very small percentage of people. Okay, let's look at a bar chart. This is the bar chart. This is really the same information, but just shows you in a different way. You can see single on the left, then it's married, and you put those two together, single and married, that's the vast majority. And then you've got divorced and widowed on the right. It works out to being just under 7 million out of population of, what are we, 60 million, something like that, 65 maybe. Actually here it gives the population as 57, looks like 58 million. But look at the civil partnership in the middle. It's only 99,500 people that are involved in a civil partnership. So the law was changed to accommodate them. Now, I'm not saying it's wrong to change the law to accommodate a small group of people if they are being seriously disadvantaged. But it does make me wonder where the disadvantage comes in when we're seeing it's also introduced a prejudice towards people of a certain religious standing. And please bear in mind, this is not just Christians. It doesn't just go against Christians, it goes against Muslims as well. So you've got two, I'm going to say fairly large religious groups. In fact, in this country, for the religious people, the majority are Christian. And then overall through the whole country, we've got about 5% who are Muslim. Let's look at the last one of the graphs we're going to look at. And this is a comparison of opposite sex and same-sex marriages from 2014, 2015, 2016. Opposite sex marriages, that's between man and a woman, those are in the blue, and same-sex marriages are there in the orange. And as you can see, the same-sex marriages, it's a very small majority, and also it's not really changing. And again, I'll refer you back to Masha Gessen's quotation there, where she says it's that fighting for a gay marriage generally involves lying about what they're going to do with marriage when they get there. It's not that people necessarily want to get married. But here's an interesting thought. If the family unit breaks down, then so does society. For example, in the church here, we're all brothers and sisters before God, our Father, Jesus, our elder brother. For those without family who come into the church is more than able to fill the gap. And I think of my own personal experience when I came into the church, because of the way that I came from a family that was predominantly spiritualist. Therefore, my mother rejected my Christianity, and I ran the risk. My mother said to me, if I returned to her house talking about Christ and Christianity, she would kick me out of the house. A mother who had tolerated everything else in my life, but as soon as I became a Christian, the intolerance came in. And then there were those that I was involved with because I'd come in from a criminal lifestyle. People didn't like the idea that I'd now become what they would call a goody-goody Christian. And so I lost my family, I lost my friends, but the church was more than able to fill the gap. And when I came into church, I found that I had mothers and fathers, aunts and uncles, brothers and sisters were all there because they took very seriously what it says in Matthew 23 and verse 8, all ye are brethren. So we must be very careful about anything that is an attack against the family. And we should be praying not just alone, but also together in our units, praying for each other on a regular basis, studying together, spreading the gospel via the witness of the family, because the family is a passive reflection of Christ in our lives. Or in other words, we should be encouraging and lifting each other up. I'm going to quote from the book of Galatians. Galatians chapter 4, verses 4 and 5. When the fullness of time was come, God sent forth his Son, made of a woman, made under the law, to redeem them that were under the law, so that we might receive the adoption of sons. Notice here that the metaphor is being used of the family. There's a family metaphor in our Christian walk, our Christian relationship. Galatians chapter 4, verses 6 and 7. And because you are sons and daughters, God has sent forth the Spirit of his Son into your hearts, crying, Abba, Father, wherefore thou art no more a servant, but a son. And if a son, then an heir of God through Christ. So to put it in a nutshell, no longer are we slaves to sin. Now we are sons and daughters of God. In the book of Ephesians, chapter 3, verses 14 and 15, Paul writes, for this cause I bow my knees unto the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, of whom the whole family in heaven and earth is named. So in 2021, let us reaffirm the family. The family is God's ordained unit, not just the biological, but also the spiritual, because we together are part of that spiritual family. As part of our commitment to Christ, let us reach out to our brothers and our sisters. For each one of us, when we reach out to God in prayer, we are crying out to God, my Father. If we all have one Father, then we should be joining together in the family of God and uniting together in the common purpose that we all have. The family was ordained by God. God gave us the family so that we would understand the relationship that he intends us to have. And in having that relationship, we are able to look at each other and say, we are brother and sisters. We are all members of one family, all equal in that family, because we all have one Father, our Father in heaven. Any attack against the family is an attack against God, because the family is God's ordained unit.